and welcome to this edition of FYI. I'm Elaine Chang-Baxter, the Director of Partnerships for Montgomery County Public Schools. With us in the studio today is Lori Horkan. Lori is a staff development teacher at Robert Frost Middle School. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you define equity in education, and then why is that so important?
You know, I think the why is probably more important than what. And you know, a lot of us have learned about Simon Sinek's golden circle. You know, start with why. It's important because it's what we do. It's why we're here, making sure that all of our students feel good about themselves and can achieve at high levels. All of our kids. And so what it is it's access, it's opportunities, it's taking a look at many factors in a child's life, everything from race to socioeconomic conditions to social emotional conditions, and making sure that we provide all of the children what they need to be really successful and to offer them the opportunities they need to have access to programs, to high-level education, teachers. So that's really what equity is and why it's important.
And so what do you do as your role as staff developer to support the students and then to support the staff?
You know, I like how you said, what do you do to support students and then the staff? Because obviously students come first in everything we do. And I make sure that I continue to ask the question, what are we doing for kids? You know, how will this affect our students? So professional development, I think, is at the heart of everything we do. I mean, we're educators, so certainly learning and teaching, it sort of goes hand in hand. So as a staff development teacher, I keep pushing this work and making sure that at the heart of everything we do is equity. A lot of people like to talk about the lens of equity, and it really is a lens. It's not a thing. It's a part of everything we do, everything, whether it's hiring practices, programming, professional learning, who's teaching which courses, how are we allocating funds. And so as the staff development teacher, the teachers, the administrators, the counselors, they're my students. And so I want to make sure that when they're planning, when they're providing opportunities, they continuously ask the question, you know, how are we doing? How are our students doing? You know, are we providing for all of them?
Thank you for sharing that. Can you share how this lens in which staff are operating translates into the classroom? Can you give us a couple of examples?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the simple way is to say, well, it's not simple, it's complicated. The complicated way is to say cultural responsive teaching. So then you say, well, like, what is that? And it's sort of a convergence or a merge between best practices and key messages. I like to say that the best teachers that I know do a beautiful dance. It's this choreography of knowing their subject and how to teach it, building relationships, using data to support the practices. So specifically, you know, it looks like differentiated instruction. It looks like cooperative learning strategies, student-to-student discourse, authentic tasks, personalized learning. That we've learned is not enough, because relationship building and really getting to know your students, their families, I mean, this is where your work comes in with the partnerships, is a important part of it. So that is the question that teachers ask me, well, how do I do this? It's not one thing.
And what have you seen as the impact on students as a result of your work?
Well, the impact is great. You know, at Robert Frost Middle School, we're really fortunate to have a principal, Dr. Joey Jones, who sort of lives and breathes equity. I mean, excellence is sort of a motto of his, you know. And I think he kind of symbolizes this warm, welcoming, you know, what is the impact? So I'm getting astray from the question. Kids love coming to school. They really love Frost. and they work hard, and we see it, we're a high-performing school. And if you look at the data in our school, and I hate to be just data-driven, but all of our kids are achieving, you know, and I think they want to do well, and I think we see that parents come in and they support us and we support them.
I think when a staff works together to value students and show them that they care, I think that creating that environment motivates the students to perform better.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's for themselves or because they want to please the staff. But I think that just that welcoming, you know, we care about you, your culture, your values, you know, your starting point. Such an important message to send to our students. What about the work with staff? What have you seen as the impact of your work as a staff developer with staff when it comes to embracing these equity initiatives?
You know, I think that over the years, we have become more asset thinkers than deficit thinkers. I think that I think the staff really understands the importance of learning about a student's culture, but deep culture. I think the biggest impact on the staff is personal awareness. I think the work of equity starts with personal awareness. You know, in Montgomery County, we've done a lot of work with the Courageous Conversation protocols, and I think that our staff is, you know, really got into that, understands that it starts with me. It starts with understanding my own feelings of race, culture, equity. And so I see a big change in our staff in that way. Relationship building, relationships are #1 with our staff. And as you said, I mean, that helps with everything.
That's great. And I know that your school's been intentional in your equity work. Do you feel like it's just best practices at this point, or is there still more work to be had in terms of staff development?
Well, yeah, you know, intentional. So this work is not a once and done. You know, it's the kind of thing that, you know, it starts with a vision. As I said, our principal has a vision, but then it's really about, like, in the work of equity, like to talk about the equity warriors. So this band of professional staff that, all staff that, you know, really puts equity first. So it's not one thing. It's not, we'll do the implicit bias training, which we did, and we were, you know, was part of what we were already doing. We utilize much of what Montgomery County Public Schools has to offer. I mean, we're really fortunate in Montgomery County that we have an equity initiative unit, and Troy Body and his people have been remarkable. So we have teams of teachers, not a teacher, but teams of teachers that go out to his trainings and then bring it back. I very rarely provide professional development alone. I typically have somebody standing with me and working with me to develop a training plan. We brought study circles into Robert Frost and the work with John Landsman and his people, and now we're working together with our high school to sort of do a partnership program between middle and high school. We've done a lot with our parent community, principal parent breakfasts and panel discussions. We brought in guest speakers. You know, one thing I will say in terms of intentional, I think it's really important for a school to look at their own community and think about your own unique needs. So in our school, our South Asian population is growing rapidly, and you know, we really looked at that in terms of the work of equity. We had a wonderful social justice author and social justice activist come in and speak to our leadership team and then to our whole staff, Deepa Iyer. Again, using MCPS. Dr. Betty Collins has come in and spoke to us about the history of Montgomery County. So it's really about, we're intentionally looking at many areas. It's not like one thing. It's not just our instructional practice.
Right. So you're not taking a package program and then implementing it with staff. So
Yeah.
do you have any other tips for schools that are thinking about initiating these equity strategies or equitable practices within their schools?
Yeah.
How would they go about getting started? I know certainly looking at their own demographic to figure out what needs could be. What else would you suggest?
Well, a number of years ago when I was working with our resource counselor and one of our assistant principals, Daryl Johnson, to really get this off the ground. One of them brought in a brochure from Harvard and said, maybe we should see if we can get a grant and do this. And my response then was, why go to Harvard when we have MCPS? And I really do think that, and I don't say that to be arrogant, but I think that we have so many resources in our county. We look to the experts, we have looked to the experts like, Gloria Ladsing Billings and Geneva Gay and Pedro Noguera, and we've looked to their work. But we have people in our county, and I've already mentioned Troy Body and his office, John Landsman and his work with study circles. I mean, we have partnerships with McDaniel College, Equity, Excellence and Education Program, and other schools. I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge, bringing together staff development teachers from your cluster. And I'll end by saying, it's always important to bring in the students. So student voice is and parent voice is the most critical component of this work.
Right. So how do you know you're doing well if you don't bring in the student voice and the parent voice?
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for being on our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm Elaine Chang Baxter. I'm the Director of Partnerships. Join us next time on FYI.